His teachings have really been stirring up trouble. We knew that something had to be done. He's been spreading stories about us and turning the people against us. We've been trying to trip him up while he's been teaching, but he always wriggles out with an answer. We've been wanting to arrest him for a while now, but he's been very public recently, and we were afraid of the people's reaction. He has been winning their favor more and more. We've been trying to think of ways to discredit him. He cannot be on his own any longer. It was very fortuitous of us that one of his men, the one named Judas, stumbled in our midst. He was already questioning what Jesus was saying, and with a little prodding and the offer of 30 pieces of silver, the deal was struck. He led us straight to Jesus. He was in a garden, out of the public eye. We arranged a signal so our men would know who to arrest. Judas was to kiss the man. I am told he knew and called Judas out as his betrayer. A small scuffle broke out, and one of the men lost an ear, or at least they tell me he did. I also have a report that Jesus touched the man and he was healed, but they must be confused in their information. Once we announced that Jesus was to be put to death, Judas came back to us. I don't know if it was out of guilt or remorse or shame, but he claimed he had betrayed innocent blood. Well, that was on his head. We were already planning on how we wanted the trial to go. We knew what had to be done. Judas threw the coins at us and left. We didn't care. He had served his purpose.
I was standing guard while the trial was going on. The trial of that man, Jesus. He came from Annas and then to Caiaphas. He was already looking in a right state before the trial began. He was surely beaten. He had a big welt on his face. We all saw the man that came with him, but at a distance to make it seem like he wasn't with him. We even asked him if he knew the man. He swiftly denied it. We all knew this trial was decided, even before Jesus stepped foot inside. We saw the high priests pay off people for false testimony. There were plenty of people looking for easy money. However, I heard that they were so eager that their testimonies didn't add up, and they started going off script. We heard the cheers and jeers. They must have condemned him to death, I said. That's the only reason for that cheering. They brought Jesus out. He was even more beaten at that point than when he went in. One of the other guards again asked the man that had followed Jesus here, "Didn't I see you in the olive grove with this man? He called you Peter." This Peter replied again, "I don't know the man." Immediately a cock crowed. Peter's face went pale as could be. He shut his eyes in apparent shame, as if he was remembering something. He then went out and wept bitterly. They brought the man, Jesus, to Pilate, the governor.
In order to avoid ceremonial uncleanliness, we stayed out of the palace with the rest of the Jews and waited for Pilate to come out to us. We were there to see what happened, just like everyone else. There were chief priests and their men trying to rouse the crowd, and their voices were the loudest of all that day.
The governor tried to give Jesus back to the priests, saying that he could find no charge against Jesus. Honestly, we believed him. But the others in the crowd shouted that he stirred up trouble with his teachings.
Pilate even sent him to Herod, who in turn sent him back. He again tried to release him, saying again that they could find no basis of charges against him. He even offered to release him for the feast day.
You see, it is custom at the feast to release a prisoner. But the chief priests and their men were already shouting for Barabbas,
one of the insurrectionists.
Right. We were convinced and wanted Jesus released to us. But we were drowned out by the louder voices of, "No, not him! Give us Barabbas! Away with this man! Release Barabbas to us!"
When Pilate asked, "What shall I do then with Jesus who was called the Christ?" they called out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" With loud shouts, they insistently demanded that he be crucified, and their shouts prevailed.
Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. They stripped him and put a purple robe on him, and then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand and knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of Jews," they said. They spit on him and took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. Pilate tried one last time to have him released. But the chief priests and their men kept shouting, "Crucify! Crucify!"
The cry went up that he must die because he claimed to be the Son of God. Pilate looked very frightened when he heard that. He tried over and over again to get Jesus released. But the crowd, our crowd, was growing angrier and more bitter. We could hardly stand to be standing in the midst of such hatred and contempt.
Pilate saw he was getting nowhere, and that instead an uproar was starting. He took water and washed his hands in front of us. "I am innocent of this man's blood," he said. "It is your responsibility." All the people answered around us, "Let his blood be on us and our children."
So Pilate released Barabbas and sent Jesus to be crucified.
My father received the order for 3 crosses to be built. We didn't always make crosses, but my father told me it was our way of appeasing the Romans. He never liked doing them. I once asked him if they ever told him who they were for or what they did to earn the punishment. He said no, and I could tell that it always bothered him. He said it was better not to know, but I didn't believe him. He usually did 1 or 2 at a time. 3 was a big order. But he took it. I was helping him, and I told him I thought we should go to the crucifixions. He paused and looked at me. He stared at me, and I stared back. I wasn't sure if I stepped out of line. Finally, he nodded, and we went back to work. I let out the breath I was holding. We went to Golgotha, where we saw the man, the one named Jesus, crucified next to 2 other men. Asking the different people there, we could not find anyone with a straight answer on his crimes. There was a sign that read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." People questioned the sign, but the man who wrote it, my father told me it was just the Governor Pilate, who said, "What I have written, I have written." My father told me that he had heard this man, Jesus, called the Messiah. I was confused. How could the Messiah die on a cross? The cross my father and I made. The soldiers and other men were mocking Jesus and spitting on it. Was this the Messiah? There were women weeping at the foot of his cross. One of them called him her son. I looked up at my father. I could see tears pooling in his eyes. I looked away. Darkness came over the land. Yet we stayed. My father said it was important for us to stay. I agreed and we stayed. Suddenly, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He then said he was thirsty, and he was given something to drink off of the sponge. He lifted his head and said, "It is finished." And he died. Immediately the ground shook and the earth split. My father grabbed me close until it was over. We heard the centurions shout, "Surely he was the Son of God." The earth was still again. Everything was still. I looked at my father, who was crying. I said, "Let's go home." And he squeezed my shoulder, and we left for home.
Joseph and I were secretly disciples of Jesus. It was terrible seeing him beaten and mocked. We saw everything. We watched as Jesus carried his own cross out. We watched as he fell again and again. We saw the crown of thorns digging into his head, the blood dripping down his face. We saw him cry out to the Lord, and we saw him lift up his spirit when he died. All secretly watching, but what could we have done? We didn't do anything except stand and watch and wonder, how could this be happening? Because that day was a day of preparation, and the next day was a special Sabbath. We asked Pilate to have the bodies taken down. His soldiers broke the legs of the first man who was crucified with Jesus, and then the other. But we pointed out that Jesus was already dead. One of the soldiers didn't believe us and pierced his side with a spear, and a sudden flow of blood and water came out. The scripture was instantly recalled in my head. Not one of his bones will be broken, and they will look on the one they have pierced. After this, Joseph asked Pilate if he could remove the body of Jesus, and Pilate permitted it. So we took the body of Jesus and bound it with burial cloths along with spices, according to the Jewish burial custom. Now in the place where he had been crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb, a tomb in which no one had yet been buried. Since the tomb was nearby, we laid Jesus there. And so Joseph and I rolled a big stone in front of the entrance to the tomb. It was over. It was all over.